Hey, what's up, guys? This is another episode of The Back Office with Dave and Jeff. Hope you guys are doing well. We had a really great time catching up with Quincy Williams in our last episode. But today is a really fun episode. We are on the eve of free agency, most likely the most important offseason and free agency period, potentially in Jaguars history, certainly
Let's
up to
go.
this point. So really hyped for what's about to kick off tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So before we get in the episode, it's going to be a fun episode. We're going to kind of set the stage for where the Jaguars are at, the opportunity that they have in front of them, and then go through some names that you should keep an eye out for and how the Jaguars might approach all the players that are available in this free agency period. But first, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor for this episode, one of our good buddies. He's got a company called The Perfect Bracket Lottery. It's a new bracket platform that guarantees you a perfect bracket. So they've got this patented algorithm that takes all 9.2 quintillion bracket possibilities and divides them equally amongst your pool, so equally and randomly. So it ensures that somebody in your pool will have a perfect bracket. So if you sign up now, you have a chance at a free $500 grand prize. So just visit perfectbracketlottery.com, check them out. This is going to be a really big thing. This is the first year that they're doing it. So show some love there. So, Dave, let's set the stage. The Jaguars have $74 million to spend. So far in free agency, there's been the franchise tag period. Teams have had the opportunity to do internal signings or re-signings. And you're seeing a lot of contract restructuring amongst the NFL because the salary cap has actually been reduced to $182.5 million. Previously, it was at about 193, I believe. So the cap's reduced. Typically, the cap keeps getting bigger, but because of lost revenue due to COVID, there's less money for teams to spend this year. So we've gotten to hear from Urban Meyer and Trevor Baalke in recent press conferences. Dave, how do you feel about those comments and where or how the Jaguars might approach free agency?
Yeah, I think listening to Urban and Trent, there's kind of 5 key themes that came out that I'll walk through real quick, and then maybe we can dive into individually for a minute. The first is that whether or not it's a smokescreen or not, no idea yet, but there seems to be kind of this overall comfort with the offensive line that I think a lot of Jaguars fans were probably maybe not super surprised by, given that they retained George Warhop going into a total rebuild of the coaching staff. He was one of the few Jaguars coaching staff members from last year that actually was retained, but still an interesting topic to kind of dive into. The second is the desire for big playability that they either don't believe exists on the team today or doesn't exist in a degree high enough to their liking. You hear Urban, me as a Gator fan, always heard Urban say his saying 4 to 6 A to B. You have 4 to 6 seconds per play. Got to get from point A to point B. That's what he's all about. So it's no surprise that speed is going to be a priority in free agency and in the draft, which is really what I think big playability to Urban means. So reading between the lines, I think it's really adding more speed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Third key theme was that it was quite clear that whether or not they've watched a tremendous amount of tape on last year's defensive line, the only 2 players that impressed them were 1, Josh Allen, and 2, Devon Hawkins, aka Devon Hamilton. Little slip up by Urban there, but no big deal. And I don't think that would surprise anybody. I don't think there's a whole lot to call out from last year's defensive line play that would make you feel great going into the season. So it's not really a shocker that they feel like that's a big place that needs to be addressed, and why there's not a whole lot of names that they're throwing around other than those 2 who are really recent additions to the Jaguars and people that we've always kind of said they'd be building around. So that's not a huge surprise. The fourth theme I'd say is the secondary kind of being in transition. Obviously last year, the 9th pick overall, we took CJ Henderson out of the University of Florida. Urban specifically, I believe, made a bunch of comments about CJ and feeling good about him as kind of a building block going forward. But outside of that, there's a ton of question marks, right? Didn't have a ton of consistency at that other outside corner spot. Sidney Jones showed up last year as an unrestricted free agent that we picked up, I believe, over the summer. and played pretty well. I think he had 2 picks last year and 20 to 30 tackles, something like that. So a good player, but was on a 1-year deal and could possibly not be coming back to Jacksonville. The team recently re-signed Trey Herndon, which is a little bit of a head scratcher in my opinion. I didn't think Trey Herndon, nothing against the guy, but just hadn't really played at a level where that would be the person you prioritize as that first re-signing. I would have thought they would have reallocated the money to Sidney Jones, but we can definitely talk about that. And then obviously at the safety position, with Josh Jones, had some flashes of good play, but not somebody that you would think would be like kind of a key foundational piece. And Gerard Wilson kind of is what you think he is. He's never kind of gone above and beyond what you thought he'd be. So not a surprise that the secondary would be an area that they're trying to address. And then the fifth, and I think by far the most important, is that this regime, from the coaching staff to the front office, truly believes in creating Duval as a destination for NFL players. And they're going to do everything from, making sure players look the best, they're prepared the best, they have the best facilities, and hopefully they play the best. And so that, I think that's gotten everybody really, really excited. So maybe to jump back to the top, comfortable with the offensive line. As everyone is familiar, and Jeff, you already alluded to, Cam Robinson was retained on the franchise tag. He's yet to sign, so he's not technically on the roster yet. It'll be interesting to see what they do. My perspective on that is, at the moment, it's kind of a free option for the team. Until he signs, he doesn't really exist on the roster. And as a result, we can still kind of go after the key left tackle free agents in the market. I'd say the main one being Trent Williams, previously of the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously the big fish, if you will, out there right now, but also the Chiefs cut Eric Fisher last week due to cap constraints. So that's an interesting one to talk about, but I'd be curious to hear what you think about that, Jeff. What do you think is going on with Cam, and do you think we'll make a big push towards Trent Williams?
Yeah, that's still a really interesting situation. It's been nice to see how candid Urban and Balky have been in their press conferences, and they did speak, positively about Cam. They think that he's talented. Our offensive line coach, Andy Warhop, vouched for him. And so, but they weren't gushing about him. So I do think that situation has not fully played out yet. Certainly with Cam Robinson on the franchise tag, it's a $13.7 million tag. There's a pretty bare left tackle market with more buyers than players. I think you can move Cam Robinson if you do hit the home run in signing Trent Williams, who is by far, in some rankings, he's the number one free agent available. He's just super rock solid at left tackle. You don't have to worry about that position anymore. So it'll be really interesting to see if they try to make a play towards Trent Williams, who in a recent interview with Richard Sherman spoke pretty positively about the Jaguars being a destination and being a team that's ready to win, referencing the quarterback position. And, that's something that the 49ers don't have quite figured out right now. So,
yeah, it kind of goes back to the whole, the change has already started with the team and Urban really creating a destination in Jacksonville that previously hasn't existed. And I think it should be super exciting to everybody from a fan standpoint that's the case, and that players that have never set foot in the city probably are already talking the house is already built. So super cool. I'm really excited to see where that plays out. Obviously, with all the hype of Trevor Lawrence coming in, the last thing you want is a Joe Burrow situation from last year where you're letting this guy that is the future of your franchise just get beat up repeatedly. And bringing in a guy like Trent Williams really does solidify that position for at least 2 to 3 years. He's 32 years old right now, but has a lot of good football left based on everything that we saw last year. So I think that would be a huge win for the Jaguars, and they should obviously pursue it.
Yeah, however it plays out at left tackle, it single-handedly is the most important decision this offseason. I think potentially the biggest decision that they'll have to make probably over the next couple of years. It's tough because it's the first decision that they have to make in this new job, but they got to get it right. If Cam Robinson sticks around, he's going to have to elevate his play. He's talented, but
it's been spotty.
Yeah, it's been spotty. So if there's one thing from those pressers that I thought might have been smoke was how they spoke about Cam Robinson and Andrew Norwell.
That That's a good one to touch on too.
Yeah, so Andrew Norwell, there was this rumor that he was potentially on the trade block. I think what the Jaguars did is they went to him and said, "Hey, man, let's restructure your contract. This is year 4 of his deal, and that cap number is getting up there. He was the highest paid interior lineman in the NFL when he signed the deal in 2018. So it makes sense that they would come to him and say, "Hey, look at what everyone else around the team is doing. They're restructuring their contracts. They're issuing signing bonuses that are then going to be spread out over multiple years to lower the cap hit for this present year." And Andrew Norwell didn't want to play ball. So I think that's interesting. We can cut him and save $9 million.
Yeah, if he's a pre June 1 cut, it's a $9 million release against the cap back towards us, which is interesting. To play devil's advocate a little bit, not on the money side, leaving that alone for a minute. I mean, he is still 29 years old. This last season was by far his best season. I think the Jaguars would be smart not to open up another hole. Obviously there's a lot of places that we need to put bodies in that can play high level football. And he's proven that he can do that. So I would hope that maybe they get another crack at the apple on the money side, because he's young, he's super talented, and there's really no need to kind of shake it up there. But yeah, so I think, the offensive line will continue to be a storyline to watch. And we can hit on that a little bit more later. The second kind of read through all the press conferences with speed, like we talked about. Urban really, really, really wants speed all over the field. I think that the one level beneath the kind of surface of the comments is really this idea that the wide receiver group isn't exactly what he's looking for. He's always kind of had the big play ability, all the way back to Florida, a guy like Percy Harvin, that could take what you said when we were chatting earlier, 2-yard drag route to the house on any given play. And I tend to agree. There's no one quite like that on the team right now, though I would push back a little bit and say that I believe that the wide receiver group is one of the most talented on the roster. I think that, yeah, there's definitely some compliments that could be added, but I'm a big believer in what they've already built. So I'm interested to see who they go after. I know we've tossed around the idea of a guy like Curtis Samuel. He ran a 4.3 40 back when he was drafted, I think in 2017 or 2018. Had a good year last year in Carolina. I think he had something like 70 to 80 catches, almost 900 yards, 3 touchdowns, something like that. And he's played with really bad quarterbacks in the 3 or 4 years he's been in the league. So that's an interesting one to watch. But I don't think it's exclusive to the offense. I mean, I think Urban's going to be looking for that on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that the core area there will be the secondary, which was one of the other kind of themes that we wanted to hit on. What's your overall take on how the secondary looks right now?
Yeah. Secondary is interesting. How they approach the whole free agency period is going to be really, really interesting. I certainly think that the whole secondary has to be rebuilt outside of CJ Henderson. So the Trey Harding signing makes some sense because he's flexible. He can play inside, outside. It's just a depth signing. So I think that we'll go after one of the premier cornerbacks, and we'll get into some of the guys that we like in each position group. I thought him mentioning the secondary being like third in priority to the defensive line, and then how much emphasis he placed on wanting to add more wide receiver talent. I thought that was really interesting, and it gets us, starting to speculate on what is their goal for this first year. Like, we have an offense that is almost there, and certainly adding Trevor Lawrence and another wide receiver, and executing
up the offensive line,
executing whatever their plan is for the offensive line. Like, you can build that offense to be a top 10 offense in the NFL like overnight.
Agreed. And not to forget James Robinson coming off of a monster year as an undrafted rookie, probably the best ever as an undrafted rookie.
So do you do that, get the offense built? You're not going to be competitive on the defensive side, but you're going to give Trevor Lawrence an ideal situation to step in, develop, have a constructive first year, or are they going to try to? And certainly we have the money to do a lot, so it's not exclusive, but it's just going to be interesting to see where they place the priority in free agency. And I think it's going to give you some insight into what the overall plan is for the year in the long term. So
totally agree. Yeah, no,
really
it's really interesting. It's easy, I think, probably to be in that seat and fall into the trap of trying to do it all at once. And despite how great of a position we're in, both from a cap standpoint and then also from a draft capital standpoint, you could kind of, I think, talk yourself into, oh, we can fill every one of these holes in a year. I think you're almost better suited in maybe not going a total kind of 50-50 on this and do kind of focus your efforts on one side of the ball, at least as it translates to or relates to free agency. So
yeah, something they've emphasized is Baalke emphasized value a lot. So, not just taking a guy to fill a need, you're taking a guy because his talent compared
justifies the price tag.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's value in that. So I think that's really interesting. And I think an important concept that, when we do our free agency speculations, or we're trying to fill the holes at once, but, that we just need talent on this team. Like, the end goal here is to win a Super Bowl. We need talented guys, even if it doesn't always, fit what we think the order of this build should be. It's a matter of raising the level of talent on this team, and so I think that's what they're going to do. However, each coordinator, the offensive and defensive coordinators, so Darrell Bevell and Joe Cullen, they did present a list of needs to Urban. So Urban has that order of basically their wish list for either side of the ball. Trevor Baalke's just kind of there to guide Urban through this process. I think it's pretty clear that Urban's going to be calling the shots, and Baalke's just going to be, making sure he's playing by the rules. And
Trent's definitely he's definitely number. He's maybe not even number 2, but definitely not the guy calling the shots.
He's the business advisor for sure. But Urban's running the show, so they've got some decisions to make. We touched on Cam Robinson. We'll see how that plays out. You and I are both in the camp that we're going to make a run at Trent Williams. Some other internal re-signings that we have to make decisions on. DJ Hayden, he is our nickel corner. He's played really good football for us. His contract's up, though. He's been with us since 2018, the same period that Andrew Norwell was signed. So we'll have to make a decision on him. We'll touch on that. DeJuan Smoot, he's a defensive lineman. Kind of a bright spot last year, even though I'm not really his biggest fan. But it'll be interesting to see what he commands in the open market. Keelan Cole, he's a guy that he's been a Jaguar for so long now, but has never really done anything eye popping. So it feels like we're gonna let him hit the market. And then you alluded to Sidney Jones, our cornerback, Josh Jones, our safety, Avery Jones. He is the longest tenured Jaguar. He's a defensive lineman. We've already re-signed Trey Herndon and longtime Jaguar Tyler Shatley. He was an interior lineman. So a lot to play out internally, but I think the biggest decisions we're going to make, obviously, is going to be in the free agency market. So that being said, what kind of needs would you speculate are? What do you think the ranking of needs are as far as position groups?
Yeah. The 2 places that I think kind of build championship football teams are 1, the quarterback position, and 2, the affecting the quarterback position. And last year we had virtually no effect on the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. So I think as far as priorities go, let's jump into the defensive line to start. I think that's really where we're going to try to make a big splash, either through free agency or the draft, unclear which yet. But there's clear upgrades coming. There's, again, not to beat a dead horse, but the fact that Urban can come up with more than 2 names that he liked when watching the defensive line tape should probably tell you everything you need to know, right? I mean, they like Josh Allen, they like Devon Hamilton, and I think everybody can agree that both those guys are great pieces to build around. But you need a lot more guys than that. If you think back to the 2017 team, we had so many players that could impact the quarterback. Dante Fowler, Yannick Ngakoue, Calais Campbell, Malik Jackson. I mean, the list went on and on and on and on. Even your depth was coming in and getting sacked. So I think that's where we should start. When I look at maybe kind of my number one need, I think, is maybe not to get too deep into like position specifics, but we just were not able to stop the run at all last year. I mean, just left and right getting gashed. And so I think that in free agency at the moment, there is a big opportunity to kind of upgrade the run defense along the defensive line. And two names that really popped out to me are Dalvin Tomlinson of the Giants and Shelby Harris of the Broncos. I'll start with Dalvin Tomlinson. In my opinion, he's kind of one of the must-sign free agents of this offseason. He's got the second best pass rushing grade from a nose tackle in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus from last year. He's been super consistent in his 4-year career, about 50 tackles a year. He had 3.5 sacks in each of his last 2 years. He had 6 sacks the year before that. He's only 27 years old. It just kind of screams like a guy that you can really build around. And here's some tape of Dalvin Tomlinson.
Yeah, this is compliments of John Shipley. Just an example of, and I really like this guy too, just how disruptive he is on the interior. And the Giants made a decision on Leonard Williams, and they're going to work out a long-term deal, it looks like. But man, he's just super athletic. I mean, he was an absolute beast. I'll let this run for a little bit. Absolute beast at Alabama. So you saw him there first between the guard and the tackle, and then there he was in more of a nose tackle spot. Here he's between the guard and tackle again. And that Giants defensive line, Leonard Williams was on it. He was a pretty good player, but Dalvin Tomlinson was a big component to a lot of that success. So
yeah,
I get worried taking guys from defensive lines that are super stacked. Just because sometimes you wonder where the credit is really due. So yeah, that's a good guy to watch, and certainly I think is at the top of all our wish lists for defensive tackle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that he's going to have a premium price tag, but probably not a super premium price tag. I think you can probably get him somewhere in the $13 to $14 million a year type range. And given that he's only 27, I mean, you can lock him up for the long term, which I think is really, really attractive. So at kind of the interior defensive line spots, specifically nose tackle, I think he's a good one to watch. Shelby Harris is a good one to watch, as I talked about before, from the Broncos. He had a really high grade at nose tackle last year, had about 30 tackles, 2.5 sacks. He's a little bit older at 29. So I think Dalvin Tomlinson is the far and away better option for the Jaguars. But, there's a lot of teams that need help in the run side. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was competition there. Again, to kind of reinforce your point from earlier, we do have the most cap room available, and we're definitely going to spend here. So I think that so that's a guy to watch. There is kind of another elephant in the room that we forget about, but Al Woods was signed last year after being in Seattle for a long time, had opted out of the season due to COVID. My understanding of those contracts is they effectively freeze. So it's up to him if he wants to come back. But if he does, we're in a position where we're either having to honor his contract or release him and take the cap hit. He's been on the older side. He's 33 right now. He'll be 34 when the season starts, I believe. But another guy to kind of keep your eye on if we start hearing. I believe Trent Baalke said that they expect to have a decision in the next week from Al Woods if he's planning to return. So, I'd be all for it. I mean, we need depth, and he had a pretty successful career in Seattle for a very long time. So that's a good one to watch out for. The second, defensive line spot, obviously on the ends, changing a little bit this year with the move or the expected move to the 3-4. Some names that kind of pop out. Carlos Dunlap finished the year with Seattle, started the year with the Bengals, obviously. People around Jacksonville should be fairly familiar with him. He had a very successful career for the Florida Gators, which drafted super high, almost a decade ago. He's 32 years old, but he's that big defensive end that you want lining up across from the tackles in a 3-4. He's 6'6", 285. Even with kind of that chopped up season, he had 32 tackles and 6 sacks. So that's an interesting one. Jadeveon Clowney's on the market again after that 1-year stint with the Titans. I think, everyone would agree that they overpaid for his services. He only had 19 tackles last year, so he got paid almost $1 million per tackle, which is just crazy. I don't think his best football is behind him, but we didn't see it last year. So I think that's one that you'd have to tiptoe into cautiously. He's one of the younger guys that's on the open market at 28, and fits that profile as well, big defensive end. One guy that I think is really intriguing, that's not a free agent, but I'm going to rope him into this conversation, would be Fletcher Cox from the Philadelphia Eagles. There's been a bunch of reports out of Philadelphia that they might be looking to part with Cox over cap constraints. So as everybody's heard, you can hear the trend emerging across the league. Everybody's trying to shed, high dollar, older players. He's only 30. His best football is likely behind him, but he still had 41 tackles and 6.5 sacks last year. I think you could probably get him for 2 late round picks, maybe a 5th and a 7th, or a 6th and a 7th, and maybe work it out so that he'd restructure on the way in, so the cap hit's not so huge.
I'm all for that as well. I do really hope we go and get him. I think he's an exceptional guy to add to that defensive line, just from an experience standpoint, and he fits the scheme perfectly.
Yeah, so that's a good one to look out for.
Defensive line's tough. They're with Leonard Williams getting franchise tagged. It's super tough. There's not a ton out there, and also in the draft, it's a really weak year for interior defensive linemen. So the Jaguars are going to have to be aggressive and to make sure that they get somebody there to complement Devon Hamilton. You probably need 2 or 3 guys there. It'll be interesting to see if we re-sign Jawan Smoot. But I think for the development of Josh Allen, you have to get him some help there in the interior.
Yeah, totally agree. It's going to be super interesting to watch it unfold, because I think there's a lot of different avenues they could go. There's obviously a bunch of talented pass rushers in the draft. We're not going to talk about that too much on this show. We'll cover that kind of separately. But yeah, so those are the names to kind of look out for. And I think tomorrow, when legal tampering opens up, I think that's probably, if not the first, one of the first positions that you hear talked about, with an understanding and principle coming out. So are there any other guys along the D-line that you want to talk about, or do we hit them?
No, definitely Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris at the top. I like a guy named Sheldon Rankins out of New Orleans. He's got a little bit of injury history, but the tape that I watched, he looks really athletic, really polished, but also very disruptive. So that was a name that I'd throw out there. But yeah, I agree. I think shoring up the defensive line will be one of the probably first 2 calls Urban will make, if he hasn't already started making calls. But and then after that, it'll be interesting to see, does he go out and get something on the offensive side of the ball, or does he start to look to pad the secondary? And let's run through some of the secondary options quickly. We're stretching time a little bit here, but looking at safety and corner, we need probably 1 guy at each spot, and then the nickel corner or slot corner as well. But at safety, you've got Anthony Harris out of Minnesota. John Johnson's a really popular name that's been floating around this week. He played for the Los Angeles Rams. And then a really popular couple guys that often get linked because of the Urban Meyer connections, but Malik Hooker from the Colts and Keanu Neal from the Falcons. So the safety market's pretty strong. I think that we go and get one of those guys because the money isn't crazy. To a guy like Anthony Harris might want like 14-15 million, but the other guys you're looking more around 10 or below. So that's going to be somewhere I can see us being aggressive with. What do you think about what their approach is going to be in finding an outside corner to complement CJ Henderson?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's one of 2 routes. It's either that, in my opinion, you're going back to the draft and trying to take somebody pretty high, either that 25th or 33rd pick.
It's not a strong year for corners too.
It's not. It's not. And, there should still be kind of 6 to 7 taken in the first 2 to 3 rounds, but I think there's a pretty big drop off after the first few, and they're really not even kind of the elite talents that you've seen over the last few years. So I'm hopeful that they don't go that direction. I hope they add another guy in kind of the third, fourth range. A name to watch, in my opinion, we won't dive into it, is Efiatu Melifonwu from Syracuse, big physical corner. But I think in free agency, the way to go is to add a veteran presence. And a guy I really like that became available very recently is Janoris Jenkins from the Saints. Doesn't get nearly as much attention as Marshawn Lattimore. Obviously, a lot older in his career than Lattimore, and came in with much less hype. He's a alumnus of North Alabama University. But last year had the 12th best outside coverage grade by PFF. The last 2 years, he's had over 100 tackles and 8 picks. He's going to be 33 kind of mid-season, but I think as a stopgap for the next 2 years, that's the kind of guy you want to couple with CJ Henderson. And then again, I think you got to add beyond that. I hope that the plan isn't to put the responsibilities immediately on Trey Herndon for the slot corner, that, do it as if it's a given. I'd love to see them go after a guy like Troy Hill from the Rams. He's one of the most effective slot corners in the game, and really one of the best defensive players in the NFL last year. I think he was ranked 36th out of all defensive players. He had 77 tackles and 3 picks last year. An undersized guy, but loves to get up close to the line and hit people. So those are the 2 names that I'd be looking out for: Janoris Jenkins on the outside and Troy Hill kind of at that slot position. But both should kind of be in the $5 million range, which we could definitely absorb. So
yeah, the corner market's interesting. I think the guy at the top of the list might be the guy out of Cincinnati.
William Jackson.
Yeah. So he is a talented young dude. I would be cool with us. I would like to assume that CJ Henderson is going to be a very, very good 2 corner. And hopefully we see that upside, but I think we need a number 1 corner to complement him. And when you have 2 really talented corners, it really makes a huge difference. We saw it for so many years with AJ Boye and he who will not be named. So I think I could see them go and be aggressive and get a guy like William Jackson. Quentin Dunbar's another name. Ronald Darby's out there. Jason Verrett's a guy out of San Francisco. I like Jason Verrett a lot. He has always been kind of a underappreciated player. But what's really important about this opportunity that the Jaguars have is, teams are having to cut players, restructure contracts to get under the cap because of this unexpected change. So there's going to be a lot of veterans out there in free agency, mid-tier free agents that are going to get underpaid because there just isn't enough money to go around.
Yep.
To your point, bringing in a stopgap, those are things that you can do, that you can get a veteran presence on the team, and you can also stack depth on the depth chart, something that we've been lacking for a decade. So.
Yeah, and I know you and I are both trying to hide our excitement, but it does feel like the stars have totally aligned for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? We have the most cap room in the 1 year in the past, I don't know how many years, probably decades since the cap went down versus up. Got all this draft capital. You're getting your franchise quarterback at 1 because the Jets decided they wanted to win 2 football games for no reason. It's just a super exciting time to be a Jag. But the last thing I'll say on the secondary, I totally agree with you on the safety market. I think it's super deep. There's a lot of good options. I personally would go with Keanu Neal. I think filling the strong safety spot in free agency makes more sense in getting a younger free safety, kind of rangier. I'm not so sold on Anthony Harris. He had a down year last year. So I think addressing that in the late first round, early second round is kind of where my head's at. But really like Keanu Neal. Before we move to offense, just wanted to throw out one thing on kind of the linebacker spot. Obviously, my expectation is the plan will be to build the outside rushers around K'Lavon Chaisson and Josh Allen, which I think makes a lot of sense. I don't think that we've seen enough of Chaisson to be like, this didn't work. I think of all of Caldwell's picks from last year, many of whom I don't think will be on the team, and certainly not by the end of next year. That's one guy that, I'm not giving up on. I think he showed a little bit towards the end of the season. He obviously had a great career at LSU. So I'd like to think that those spots are fairly fixed. Maybe they look at a guy like Matt Judon, who can play kind of the Sam linebacker in a 4-3. And then when they shift to the 3-4 in different sets, he can also rush from the outside. Don't love his profile, both from like a character standpoint. I don't know if you followed that story about him berating the reporter a couple weeks ago over nothing, but I'm not totally sold on that. The thing that I think is under the radar that people aren't talking about that I think we should be talking about is that in a traditional 3-4 look, you do typically have one bigger Mike linebacker that's kind of the thumper. Because with one less down lineman, that guy's got to get up and engage the center of the guard on either side, wherever you're not having the nose tackle rush. And Joe Schobert really doesn't fit that profile. So I haven't heard anybody really talk about it. I know that on his entry interview, Charlie Strong, had effusive praise for both Miles Jack and Schobert. I've never been the biggest Schobert fan, nothing against the guy personally, but it just didn't seem like the perfect fit for us at the time. And now, especially, I think with the shift to the 3-4, kind of an interesting spot. I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to trade him. He's got a big contract, so kind of adding more cap space would be ideal. And, I'm definitely beating a dead horse here, but I love Shaq Quarterman. I think he could slot right in, and that's your solution. But if they don't feel that way, I wouldn't be shocked if Charlie Strong is looking for a true middle linebacker that's a little bit bigger in frame and can support the run game. So
yeah, I do agree. Like Schobert does feel a bit out of place there because there's a lot of required run support out of those linebackers in a 3-4. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe when they build that defensive line, at least while Schobert's here, they get some really big dudes that can two gap, may not provide as much pass rush ability, but three guys can hold down the run support primarily. Yeah. So I think that's something to watch, and maybe why they'll really go after a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson, who is just an absolute monster, and just stack up like 1,000 pounds worth of football player there in the front.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that they also the idea of kind of maybe using Schobert in more of the outside role. It doesn't make a ton of sense because you do have guys like Quincy Williams who are already kind of in that spot and can help Jack when he needs a rest, or if God forbid something were to happen to him. So that'll be an interesting spot. I think middle linebacker, and like you said, the run stopping defensive tackles that we go after. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It's gonna be crazy, us looking at the roster right now and like how quickly it's gonna turn over by Wednesday. We're gonna have probably 4 or 5 new guys on the defense. So it's gonna be exciting, really exciting. You have to think that on the offensive side of the ball, we have a ton of cap space, but they have to fix the tight end position. We know that they're going to go after someone there because there's no one in the room besides Josh Oliver. So we'll speculate on that, and then I think they can make one other big spend on the offense. And so it's curious: are they going to go after a wide receiver like Urban has placed some emphasis on? Are they going to make the Trent Williams thing happen, which would probably cut out the budget for a high-priced wide receiver? But I don't know. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, let's unpack the tight end first. I think any Jaguars fan that's a real Jaguars fan can say very confidently it's a position that I don't know, since outside of Kyle Brady and Mercedes Lewis, who were maybe less effective as receiving targets and more effective as inline blockers, but had really prolific careers for us, and I think should be recognized for that. They were great. We've never really had that dominant, new age tight end on the roster. And our attempts in getting them in the draft haven't worked. We've had some bad misses in free agency, like Julius Thomas, I think probably one of the worst of Dave Caldwell's entire career. So I think finding a guy that maybe even if he's not kind of that superstar caliber, like a Kelsey or a Kittle or something like that, you've got to get somebody serviceable in there because it just doesn't exist at the moment. Like O'Shaughnessy can come in and give you a couple of glimpses of good stuff. We've never seen what's his name? We drafted him 2 years ago. I'm blanking. He's always hurt. Josh Oliver. That's what I was looking for. We've never really seen Josh Oliver, so can't really comment on him. Hopefully he is kind of that joker tight end that can be a receiving threat. I'd love it if I thought we could get up and get Kyle Pitts, but he seems to be kind of mocked under the 6th pick repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. So that's not going to be an option, I don't think. So the guy that I'm interested in for two reasons. One, I think he's a heck of a football player, and two, it hurts our direct competitor, the Tennessee Titans, is Jonnu Smith. Had 40 catches last year, almost 500 yards, 8 touchdowns. And I love the double whammy of taking a guy like this away from a competitor. So let's watch the tape. He's got good mobility in the open field. He's fast. He's also really physical. I think he had top 5 broken tackles for a tight end last year. So really intriguing prospect.
Yeah, he's a beast after the catch. Super athletic, and he can block. Ooh.
Yeah, so I think going after a guy like that makes a ton of sense. Like, maybe he is, at 25, I think his best football is in front of him. Maybe he could be kind of that dominant player going forward. He certainly showcased a lot of that ability. And I like him a lot more in comparison to somebody like a Hunter Henry from the Chargers. Had a bit of the injury bug his entire career. He's a great receiving threat, not the best blocker. Just kind of feels like we're repeating history by signing him. I think you're going to get him for 3 games. He's going to tear a hammy, and we're never going to see him again. He's going to pay $20 million.
Yeah, we can't do that again.
We can't go through that. So I think Jonnu Smith is the clear upgrade, and I think that they should throw the bag at him and bring him to J-Bill. So.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm all in on that. Tight end market's pretty scarce, so I think that Jonnu Smith might be your second or third call of the day.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think you're really waiting for anything in the draft. If Pitts isn't there, which he's not going to be unless they make a huge play to get back up and get him, which would be an unbelievable combo for Trevor Lawrence, obviously. But I don't think there's anybody worth taking in the first 3 rounds. I mean, I think you're really like, if you can get one of the 3, 4, 5, 6 best guy in round 4 or 5, I think it's an interesting thing to do again and just keep replenishing that room. But I think Jonnu Smith is the clear in a way. That's who you got to go get.
Yeah, they said in the pressers that they have to completely rebuild that room. So we'll probably go after one of the top guys, Jonnu Smith, Gerald Everett's another guy to watch who was behind Tyler Higbee in Los Angeles, who's super athletic. So those 2 guys to watch. I'm also out on Hunter Henry, but we'll see. We'll probably
things happen.
Yeah, we'll probably end up getting 2 tight ends in free agency just because we need the depth that badly. And agreed, it's after Kyle Pitts. There's a couple guys in the draft, and we'll have a whole draft episode here in a few weeks. But that'll definitely be a position that you'll hear some news probably late Monday, early Tuesday.
Yeah. So then maybe flipping us over to wide receiver, I'd love to get your thoughts on that position. What do you think when you look at that? Who's available in the free agency class?
So I'm really excited to hear Urban talk about speed because it feels like with DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault, what you're missing is that yards after catch, elusive speed burner kind of player. So it was nice to hear Urban say speed, and then he said big playability. And a lot of people got caught up with the big playability line. And so they wanted to start pointing at like Kenny Golladay and some other big time wide receivers that are going to be available. But the most popular name amongst the bunch for a number of reasons, both because of those comments and his connection to Urban Meyer from Ohio State, it's the guy that you mentioned earlier, Curtis Samuel. He ran a 4.33, so he's really fast on a track. I've been watching a ton of the tape on him, trying to figure out like how does he fit. And honestly, he, despite that like track speed that he has, reminds me a lot of like a leaner Laviska. He's a pretty tough dude. He runs through people. He has like a one cut kind of move, but he's not looking to like reverse field or do any of those crazy things that you see like Tyreek Hill do or a guy like Kadarius Toney in the draft. The draft is super rich with these kind of slot receivers who make dudes miss. So I don't know what they're going to do there. It feels like a luxury because I'm also high on our wide receiver room, but I do want it to just like make it rain riches on Trevor, give him,
everything he needs.
So that's a really interesting place. It feels like a position group that we don't need to spend money on because of how many holes we have elsewhere. But yeah, well, I don't know what would you be doing in their situation?
I totally agree. I like Curtis Samuel. I don't love Curtis Samuel. I think he's going to get, over 10 million bucks a year, probably closer to 12. I'm not paying that. I don't think. I think I'm sticking with what we got and trying to get a guy in the draft. You already mentioned Kadarius Toney. I mean, he is the closest thing to Urban's kind of Percy Harvin from the old Florida days. He's also from Florida, so I think that's probably more the direction. I'm not saying it has to be Toney, but I agree with you. I think they'll probably address it in the draft because it is a luxury. I think had Allen Robinson made it all the way, that was an intriguing option to get like a truly dominant number one to pair with Chark. But I'm also pretty high on Colin Johnson as somebody that can develop into another big threat for us. And I loved Laviska last year. So I think that room is in really good shape. The one guy I'd keep my eye on if they are trying to add, a guy that seems to be kind of emerging into a true number one receiver is Corey Davis, again from the Titans. So it helps us in more ways than one. I had almost 1,000 yards last year, 5 touchdowns, 65 catches. He's also fast. He ran in the 4.4s when he came out into the draft. He's 6'3", big body. So, as far as giving Trevor more options, that's one to look at. But I agree with you. I think I'd stay away from the position.
I'm so tempted to want to go get Will Fuller, and that makes so much sense based on the comments, like talk about speed and big playability. I mean,
yep.
That's a guy that I just love how he plays. I think with Trevor, like Trevor extending a play or just throwing go routes, like that's your guy. But Balky did say that, availability is very important to them, and that's a guy with an injury bug. I mean, a guy with a hamstring injury that keeps coming up and up and up. I mean, you don't want to mess with that. It's just
no. I agree. He's really electric when he's on the field, but it's getting him on the field and keeping him on the field that's tough. And I just don't think we're at a place where we need to spend the money to get an option like that when you could probably get a really serviceable slot guy with that kind of big playability in the 4th round, something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it, but I think they're going to do it. I think Will Fuller is too tempting to Urban. I think Urban says we can get this guy at a slight discount depending on how the market plays out. He is elite, like can be the best player on the field at times, and he's going to be our number 3 option. So we can take the risk on the injury. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Everyone's already pegged in Curtis Samuel, like it's a done deal. And I am just like, I want a little bit more out of him. And like people want to like fight me on Twitter about it, but I don't see anything that exciting.
Yeah, no, I think you described him perfectly. He's like a leaner Laviska Shenault. Like, I mean, even the way they used him, bringing him into the backfield at running back. I mean, it's like the same. He's that chess piece, and we already have that guy.
Now he's tough as nails, dude. Like he has like that Allen Robinson ability to like go up, make contested catches. Like he has for a little guy, has a really big catch radius for his size. So he's a great player. I just don't think it's the piece that Urban has described.
Agreed.
We'll see.
Agreed. I don't think we need to spend much time on this one. They've made comments, and I don't think we mentioned it earlier, around the running back room and saying, James Robinson, total animal, but we need somebody that can take a little bit of the workload off of him. Obviously, Ron Armstead's still on the roster. Haven't seen a ton of him because he was hurt.
I almost forgot about that guy. We were so high on Rock Armstead, and I like him. I'm rooting for him. But
yeah, me too. Devine Ozigbo, I'm not sure if he was on a 1-year deal when we picked him up off waivers. Or
I think he should still be on the team.
Yeah.
But yeah, paying a free agent running back in most years is obviously a terrible idea. But
especially this year, I don't see it. I don't
know. Maybe because it's a position that has become devalued over time in a really tight free agent market period where people have to, spend very, very wisely. Maybe that position gets even further devalued, and you can go out and get a guy like Philip Lindsay for like, $3 million or Chris Carson.
It's funny that you say that. I think Lindsay is, out of all of the candidates that we could go after in free agency, I think he's one of the most interesting. Like his numbers have fallen off, in each consecutive year. But it's really because the team around him has just kind of devolved, right? I mean, they came off of, when he joined the team in 2018, they were only a couple of years removed from the Super Bowl. They thought they were going to contend again. It just hasn't quite worked out. He's interesting. He's kind of that shiftier guy. He had big receiving numbers his first 2 years. He didn't have so much activity there last year, but he's interesting. To your point, like, I don't think this is realistic at all. But again, like if you can get a guy like Aaron Jones or something on like a steep discount because nobody wants to touch a higher paid running back,
Yeah,
it's like, why not? I
it,
mean, if you
if
got the cash and nobody can pay him, like, I
if
don't
it's
know.
like Tuesday afternoon and like he's been thrown like a couple $4 or $5 million offers, and you're like, hey, do you want to come here for 5.5 or 6 and I don't know, maybe you miss on Trent Williams and yeah, that's a guy that would be really fun. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's some other names out there too that are interesting. Like Kenyon Drake is a really good player.
Yep.
And then
Alabama.
then some older guys like James White from the Patriots. Surprisingly, Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley are free agents. I don't know if we'd ever touch them, but I mean, imagine if you bring in Todd Gurley if he has any juice left for like $2 million. Like,
why not?
He's going to play second fiddle. Why not?
I agree. It's interesting. That'll be a good one to watch.
We got so much money to spend. It's a very unique opportunity that won't come around again with the cap being reduced, and you're going to see a lot of big players fly under the radar. And we've got money to burn. They said in the press conference that they want to push the limit on spending to the cap. So that means that we have to spend 65 million plus to be up to the cap. So Matt's talking about you're talking about bringing in like 6, 7, 8 players. So this roster is going to dramatically change come Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah, and it's a good lead into the last group that we haven't talked about at length. But on the offensive line side, if you don't sign Trent Williams for whatever reason, you can't get to the right number, or he gets re-signed by San Fran, or make up however he doesn't get to Jacksonville, unlocking another $22 million. I mean, it puts you in a position that you can take a flyer on probably 3 other offensive players, just in that kind of freed up cap alone. We talked about Trent earlier, just to hammer it home. Like, I think we're both big believers in bringing a guy like that in to make sure that Trevor's not getting killed early in his career. I'd be stoked if we found out tomorrow that Trent Williams was going to be a Jaguar. I hope that that's where their head's at. I agreed with what you said earlier. I think the Cam stuff and the way they messaged it was more smoke than reality. I don't think they're convinced. Like, I don't know how you could be convinced. Nothing against Cam, but really kind of up and down play. Obviously, he battled through the injury a couple of years ago and has been kind of fighting his way back ever since. Last year was probably a better year on average than any year since his rookie year, but I think Trent would be a natural upgrade. Then, I think that they'd probably try to address kind of the depth at tackle in the draft. And Jawaan Taylor had a pretty non-memorable year last year. So that's another question mark, is if you want to bring in a guy in kind of the second round range that can compete at both left and right tackle, assuming you don't get Trent Williams, that'd be something I'd be looking towards. Kind of shifting to the interior, we spoke about it. Oh, all good. Shifting to the interior of the line, or actually before I shift over, I mean, any other thoughts on tackle?
Yeah, I honestly, the Cam Robinson is probably the next best option after Trent Williams. The left tackle market's that bare. Such an important decision. So Urban alluded to it in the press conference that they tagged Cam because they have to cover their asses. You got to have someone there. It's a decent option. It's not great. You want the best for Trevor. So I think that they're going to make a hard play. And why not? Write him a check that he can't refuse. Yeah, we're not going to win a Super Bowl next year. Probably not the year after that. But maybe we're very, very, very competitive in a couple of years.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, it's top 3 most important positions in football. So I think if you're going to spend somewhere, spend it there. And I talked a little bit about Jawaan Taylor and that side. I think he's here to stay for at least the short to medium term. He had a bad year last year, but I don't think it's worth kind of writing that guy off. He had a really great career at Florida and super young, super talented. All the draft pundits were super high on him when he came out. So I think that's just a time question. And if you improve the overall quality of the offensive line, his play will improve as well. And having a guy like Trent Williams teach him, it would be amazing too. So Last position group, talk about a little bit. Interior offensive line, we touched on Norwell. I think he's back. I hope he'll restructure. It sounds like, they've kind of put a hard press on him to do that, and he's not done it yet. If they were to move on at left guard, in the free agency process, there's Joe Thuney from the Patriots. He's the sixth best offensive lineman since entering the league in 2016, based on PFF. He's only 28. Norwell's 29, so they're kind of the same age. So from an age standpoint, you're not really upgrading. I think they're going to command about the same money in the open market. I'd rather go with, the devil, and I think Norwell had a good year last year, so I'd lean into that guy, and hopefully he's team friendly and comes back with some kind of restructuring, even if it's just deferring a little bit of the money.
I'm gonna play the other side of this real quick.
Okay, let's do it.
I